But I think we have to get to this core issue of dual loyalty. Meaning, in the end of the day, is Tucker Carlson right? Or is Nick Fuentes right? Are Jews in America disloyal to America? Am I going to come in this book and say something that will, endanger American Jews even more? So I think we have to really be clear about the distinction. Dual loyalty versus dual identity. Dual loyalty means, what nation are you loyal to? And for that question, Jewish law is actually very, very clear. It's called Dina de Malchuta Dina. The law of the land is the law. Right? Jewish law requires you to be a good citizen, a loyal citizen, and a model citizen even of your host country, wherever you might live. So American Jews are obligated to actually be loyal to America. They have to be loyal citizens, right?
Welcome to this episode of Shoulder to Shoulder, a podcast where a pastor and a rabbi get to the heart of issues that matter to people of faith. I'm Pastor Doug Reed here with my friend, Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. And on this episode, we'll be having a conversation with our good friend, Rabbi Elie Mischel, about his new book, Countdown: American Jews and God's Plan for Redemption. Before we jump into our conversation, please like our Facebook page and join our Facebook group, the Shoulder to Shoulder Community, where you can interact with Pesach and me all week long. The best way to support this podcast is to go on over to Patreon, subscribe to Shoulder. For just $10 a month, you're helping us bring this message of Shoulder to more and more people all around the world. As a thank you for your $10 subscription, you'll get exclusive access to chapter-by-chapter Bible study beginning in Genesis chapter 1 from Rabbi Pesach and myself. So go on over to Patreon, subscribe to Shoulder for just $10 a month. We're grateful for our sponsor, Israel 365 News, which is the place for you to go and get your news and information before going to anyone else. Go on over to Israel, the number 365news.com to check out some of the articles, and be sure to read Rabbi Pesach and my columns. Now, they have some incredible products and initiatives each and every week that we support. Pesach, what are we highlighting this week at Israel 365?
Well, we're going to talk about Bible Plus again. We talked about it last week, and I just think it's so important. It's actually going to come up in our conversation today with our guest, Rabbi Elie Mischel, who I work with at Israel 365. We talked about it last week, Bible-plus.com. This is an online platform for studying the Bible with some of the greatest educators in Israel. And we go through all the books of the Bible, and we have courses on a whole range of topics, short self-study courses where, each lesson is a video, maybe 10, 20 minutes long, sometimes shorter, sometimes a little longer. And it's really an incredible interactive platform, and you can send in questions and get your answers. And it's a subscription platform. Those who are using it are loving it. Go on over to Bible Plus. You can just Google Bible Plus and you'll find it, but Bible-plus.com, and sign up. And there's some courses that I have taught that are on there as well. So if you're a Shoulder to Shoulder Rabbi Pesach Wolicki fan, you're going to have a few courses there to study as well. But go over to Bible Plus. It's so important, especially because, Doug, we're living in an era where there is a crisis of biblical literacy. And, there's a lot of hand-wringing over it, a lot of problems with that. And we see that even with a lot of young people, returning to faith or coming to faith, that still hasn't changed the fact that biblical literacy is a serious issue. And at Israel 365, we have tried to combat that in our own way by creating this incredible platform. Again, it's, for your own self-study. If you only have a few minutes a day while you're having breakfast, while you're having dinner, just spend a few minutes doing one of these classes with really top-notch educators. We found some of the best educators in Israel, and we record these courses. And there's a massive library, a growing library of the courses on Bible Plus. So go to BiblePlus.com.
Excellent. And I always tell my pastor friends when they're looking for resources on Israel, on the Bible, there's lots of great stuff out there, and lots of organizations have a one-off book, but there's no one quite like Israel 365. Your guys' education department is top-notch, the books, materials, videos. So if you're looking to deepen your understanding of Jewish-Christian relations, of Israel, of God, the Bible, Israel 365 is a great place to start. So go and check those resources out. You won't regret it. Well, Pesach, it's a beautiful day here in Buffalo. We're back in Buffalo. Our travels were light, but we're getting ready for a big 6.5-week stint with the kids and crisscrossing the country. Lots of churches and shaking hands and kissing babies and sharing about Israel. And we're just getting started. It's been a lot of fun. So I hope people caught the YouTube link last week. I hope they're going to your YouTube channel to check out Shoulder to Shoulder. So it's Pesach Wolicki and the reads are here. Go to both of those YouTube links and subscribe. Lots of exciting stuff happening in both of our worlds.
Yeah, Doug, I got to ask you, just from the little bit of travel, the first taste that you guys had of it, how did the kids hold up in terms of, just their energy, their sleeping? Because when you're on the road, it's one thing, the kids get excited, but this is going to be a lot more than a vacation. You're going to be all over the country. This is going to become a way of life. So what's your read on how, well, pardon the pun, what's your read on how the kids are doing with all the travel?
So I'll tell you one funny story that'll give a glimpse into it. So we were in Newcastle, Pennsylvania this past weekend for just one night at a hotel. We were with a good friend of mine, Pastor Alonzo Waters, in an African-American church, about 80%
I met
African-American.
Alonzo. When Alonzo came to Israel a few years ago, I remember meeting him.
Yes, he and his wife Jody were such great hosts. Love Israel. Their church was really, really fun to be at. And these first couple churches out of the gate are all friendlies. I have several now that I've booked that I just met the pastor. I don't know anything about the church. And so I'm very interested to see how some of this goes. I know how it's going to go in the early stages because these are friends. These are pro-Israel. They're in the space. But as we move forward, it'll be interesting to see. But one funny story. So we get down, and this is our first time staying in two separate hotel rooms where my wife and I were in one room and the kids were in another room. Now, our kids make me look way better than I am as a dad. They're incredibly well behaved. But the hotel didn't have a way to give us adjoined rooms. So the rooms were about 4 rooms apart. Not a big deal. And Charlotte's 14. She watches the kids. The kids. She is a kid. She watches the boys all the time, but she's like mom number 2. And so, we were figuring out how to navigate. My wife was a little apprehensive because we didn't have direct access. We had to go down the hall to get to the room. And so we get them all situated, get them in their room. They go to sleep. No issues. The next morning, we go and wake them up and we're like, how'd you guys sleep? Was everything okay? And they were like, great. And our Abraham, our 8-year-old, gets this grin on his face. And he goes, as soon as you guys closed the door and went down the hall, we looked at each other and said, Mom and Dad aren't here. It's time to party. So they had a little time together. And Charlotte goes, we did not party, Dad. I'm like, I know you reined them in, girl. But they're really enjoying it. Honestly, they're taking it in stride. They're enjoying this week. We're going to be home for 5 days straight and do some laundry and breathe a little bit. But they're enjoying it, and they're taking all the new in. We have a code word when we go to churches so if you're having us in and you hear one of my kids say this, you'll know what it is. But we told the kids, you're going to experience a lot of new people. You're going to see a lot of people for the first time and you're going to see some people that know you because they follow me on social media, and they're going to think they know you, and they're going to come up and talk to you. And so I said, if you need a break from people, we need kind of like a code word so that you can go sit in the car, you can go to the pastor's office, we can get you away. And so the kids were going back and forth as to what the code word should be. And what we've landed on is they're going to ask us for a pickle sandwich. And so if they ask for a pickle sandwich, it means I need a break from people, Dad, get me out of here, help. And so we haven't had to use it yet. Abraham's been he's our jokester. He's our youngest. And so the very first day, the very first event we go to, we're walking to the event and he puts a grin on his face. He goes, Dad, I need a pickle sandwich. I'm like, get out of here. So it's been good. It's early, but the next 6.5 weeks will be a test for sure.
Amazing. Yeah, it's very exciting. And, again, I said it last week, but I got to say it again, that in the environment that we're in, Tucker Carlson just dropped another episode where he was attacking Christian Zionism. And, it seems that the theological question of Israel has entered into the political discourse in a way that we have never seen before. And I don't even think we ever anticipated. And the Christian Zionist movement, it right now needs to be bold, and pastors who are supportive of Israel need to be bold and need to be willing to speak up. And yeah, there are going to be some people out there who they're going to lose if they take that bold stance for Israel right now. But this is, as as Bishop Robert Stearns likes to say, this is a Bonhoeffer moment that we're in right now.
Correct.
And standing with Israel is the question of the day. It's the question facing the church. And, so at a time like this, to be moving to Israel is just amazing. And let me just say one other thing. You mentioned the YouTube channel before, that Shoulder to Shoulder recently moved to YouTube. We've been posting it on my YouTube channel because it already has, a nice growing subscriber base. And I just want to say the first 6 episodes of Shoulder to Shoulder that have gone up in YouTube have together garnered close to 100,000 views. And it's really increased our audience. And we have a number of new Patreon subscribers from that, that have come in through YouTube. So to all of our YouTube audience, thank you so much for getting on the Shoulder to Shoulder train. And if you want to get into some of the back issues, as it were, or the archive, you'll find that on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, all the places where you find audio podcasts. There's a nice big library of Shoulder to Shoulder going back close to 5 years. So make sure to check those out as well. But it's very exciting. And I suppose we should give our Patreon subscribers some new material. We should be recording some of that in the near future. We'll set some time and record some more Bible studies for you. And it's an exciting time for Shoulder to Shoulder. It's an exciting time for the Reeds. And we have a great guest this week, Rabbi Elie Mischel. Doug, you have a bio for him? You have intro there? I work with him every day. I'd rather you intro him this week.
Well, I will say this. I have had the most pleasant interactions with Rabbi Mischel. He honestly exudes joy everywhere he goes without giving all the academic accolades. I just enjoy talking to him. God willing, when we get to Israel, we'll get to connect on a Shabbat dinner or get to enjoy some time in Jerusalem together. I really look forward to getting to pop by the Israel 365 office and hang out with you guys for a bit. I think it's going to be really, really exciting. It's going to be awesome. But Rabbi Mischel is an incredible educator and has his new book out, Countdown: American Jews and God's Plan for Redemption, which is one of the things we really want to get into and talk about. So Rabbi Elie Mischel, welcome back to Shoulder to Shoulder.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. And Doug, we cannot wait for you to get here. Rabbi Pesach lives in Beit Shemesh. It's a nice place. It's a little bit sweaty over there, I'll be honest. Come to the Judean hills where we live, Efrat, right next to Bethlehem.
I've been to Efrat before.
Yeah, good breeze all the time. It's never too hot over here. You're walking where David walked. This is
Patriarch's path is right there.
Oh, absolutely. This is where you want to get to. So we're waiting for you. The Shabbat table is open. We can't wait to have you and your family.
Beautiful.
So, Rabbi Mischel, Elie, I guess we'll go by first names on this podcast. In my intro, when I was talking about Bible Plus, I was talking about the issue of biblical literacy, and there's a lot going on at Israel 365, and we do want to get into that. But first, we want to talk about your new book. You've written some amazing books. You recently wrote a book about Shabbat that everyone here, Shabbat Revolution, everyone listening to this podcast, you should get it, especially in the wake of the lesson that Charlie Kirk taught so many people, posthumously with his book coming out. Telling everyone about how Shabbat transformed his life. Well, Rabbi Mischel wrote a book. It's really a how-to book. It's a book that, besides giving you all the ideas about Shabbat and the importance of it, it also gives you some guidance. And you don't have to be Jewish to take this guidance to bring Shabbat into your life. You also wrote a very important book after October 7th, The War Against the Bible, which really helps us understand all the current events that we've been going through, the tumultuous events we've been going through since October 7th through the lens of biblical thinking. And now you've written a new book, which is about Jews and Judaism. So tell us about the book, give us the thumbnail sketch, and let's talk about what you did here and why. Sure. Thanks so much. You just mentioned before Tucker Carlson and another episode attacking Christian Zionists. But I think, from a Jewish perspective, what we hear him talking about all the time, and so many others like him, is this dual loyalty accusation. That American Jews are not really loyal to America. They're not really American. We always hear about AIPAC. Thomas, Massey just talked about this after he lost his primary election. About how AIPAC is really an arm of Israel. Of course, it's not. It's Americans who believe in supporting Israel and how that supports America as well. But we hear over and over again, both from the right, but also from the left, these accusations of dual loyalty. And
And I think it's not an accident, right? There's so many different accusations that have been made against Jews over the generations. Literally thousands of anti-Semitic canards and lies and falsehoods. And yet the one that we're hearing over and over and over again is dual loyalty from all sides, from left and from right. And that's not an accident. I believe, right, I'm going to say something a little bit wild here, but I believe that God is sending all of these people, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, and so many others, as his, maybe they're unwitting messengers of God, because they are coming to touch a particularly sore point for all American Jews, which is, who are you? What are you in your essence? Because that really is the internal crisis that's also plaguing American Jews today, right? What does it mean to be a Jew in America? Are you a religion, right? So are you, as an American Jew, just like a Catholic, an American, or is it like an evangelical American? It's just a religion, or are you somehow connected to Israel in a way that maybe compromises your connection to America? So this is something that really, really stresses out American Jews. American Jews hate talking about this topic, but I believe we're at the point in history where we cannot avoid it, meaning all of our enemies, all of these haters are talking about this topic, and it really forces American Jews to grapple with who they are and where they are meant to be going forward. And so in this book, I spend a lot of time diving into precisely that question. And what we find over and over and over again, literally beginning with Abraham and going through the entire Bible, right? God makes it extremely clear. We are not a religion. Right? We are a nation, right? According to Jewish tradition, and if you read carefully in the words of the Bible, Abraham, before God spoke to him, was already the head of a religion. God told Abraham, leave your religion and go to the land that I will show you where you're going to have a baby, right? Meaning, leave your religion and go become the father of a nation. And it just goes from there. I will make you a great nation.
What do you mean that he told him to leave your religion? I know the verse in Genesis 12 says, leave your home, leave your birthplace, your father's home, your land, right? That's what he tells him. What do you mean that he told him to leave his religion? What do you mean by that? So
there's a phrase there at the beginning of Genesis 12 that says that Abraham and Sarah, when they left, there came with them all these souls that they had made in Haran. Right? What does that mean? The souls that they had made. So Jewish tradition understands this, and I think very logically, that Abraham and Sarah they had started their own monotheistic sort of a religion. They were teaching people, guiding people. These were the souls that they had made. And many of them actually left Haran. They left along with Abraham and Sarah on this journey that they were taking to the land of Israel. Abraham and Sarah were saying goodbye. God told us that we need to go together and to create a nation. And these people then left, and some of them followed Abraham and Sarah. And we find that if you keep going through the generations, right, Rebecca, when she's pregnant, right, she's told that she has 2 nations in her womb. Right? There's no word for religion in the Hebrew Bible. This is something I think pretty shocking to people. Rabbi Pesach, you mentioned before Judaism. I actually believe that Judaism is a made-up word. It is not a Jewish word. It is not a Hebrew word. It comes from the Greek, iadesmos. It was invented much later by the Greeks, where the Greeks they're the ones who began speaking about the Jews as not just a nation, but also as a religion. But the words you hear today, Judaism or Yahadut in Hebrew, are really just translations of that Greek word. And what's even more amazing is that there's not really a word for religion in the Hebrew Bible. It doesn't come up. Today, the word is dat in modern Hebrew. But that word only comes up once, and that comes up in the book of Esther, where it doesn't actually even mean religion. It means practices or customs, things like that. So there is no word in the Hebrew Bible for Judaism, and there's no word for religion, because that's not what God was doing with the people of Israel.
I find that interesting, and you're writing this book, obviously, to spur on a conversation, a dialogue with American Jews. Do you find that line of thinking will make it more difficult or easier for them to come to the conclusion that it's time to come home to Israel, simply because we live in a pluralistic society? We compartmentalize everything. I have my religion that I go to here. I have my work that I go to here. Do you think that simplifying it all the way down, boiling it down and saying this doesn't really exist, you can't compartmentalize your life, you're all in or you're all out, do you think that makes it more challenging or less challenging for an American Jew to go, you know what, I want to be in on this?
Well, first of all, when you say all in and all out, when you understand that the Jewish people are a nation, in a sense, it's actually more expansive, right? It doesn't matter if you go to the synagogue or not. Right? That's not the issue, right? I mean, obviously, we want people to be following God's law. We want people to be, in that sense, to be religious, certainly, right? There is that element to the Jewish people, but that is not what determines your membership in the nation of Israel. We're a nation. If your mother is a Jew, then you are a Jew. And more fundamentally than that, right? If you identify as part of the Jewish nation, right, then you will be included in redemption. And how do we know that? Because if you go back to the story of the Exodus, right, the Jewish people have an unbelievable tradition that only 1/5 of the people of Israel actually left Egypt, because it says that they left Egypt armed. Right? There's that verse that says they left armed with weapons. The word for armed in Hebrew is chamushim, which it comes from the word chamesh, meaning 5 or 1/5. So the sages tell us that only 1/5, 20% of the people of Israel left Egypt. Now, who are the ones who left and who stayed behind? Right. So the sages have other traditions which are really fascinating. And they say that the ones who left Egypt were the ones who kept their Hebrew names, the ones who kept their Hebrew language, and the ones who married their fellow Jews, meaning these were not religious requirements. It wasn't the most religious Israelites who left Egypt. It was the ones who identified as Hebrews, right? The ones who kept their Hebrew names and their Hebrew language. These are national characteristics, right? So they weren't necessarily the most religious people. In fact, right, we have other traditions that say that they left Egypt. Most of them were idolaters. And there's even an amazing statement in like Jewish mysticism that when they went through the sea, during the splitting of the sea, many of them were holding their idols. Can you imagine? God is splitting the sea for them, wow. and they're clutching onto their idols as they walk through the sea. So these are the people that God saved. So their redeeming quality is that they identified as part of God's people. The other 80% who stayed in Egypt, right? They may have been religious, they may have believed in God, but they saw themselves as Egyptians first. And so I believe today, right, the key question for American Jews is not who is the most religious, but rather who identifies with the nation of Israel first and foremost, and with America secondarily. And I know that this is a sensitive issue, but I actually believe that if we could talk about this honestly, it'll actually address the anti-Semites and reduce the hatred and fear of Jews. Because once you understand who we are and what we are, once we're honest about it, and we stop lying to ourselves and lying to the nations of the world, then the nations at least can have a clearer understanding of who we are and why we're here, and then take it or leave it. There are always going to be haters. But I think many people, once they understand what we are, who we really are, they'll have a different understanding of the Jewish people.
So I want to go back to this dual loyalty issue, which again you're talking about here, because if you think back only a couple hundred years ago in Jewish history, this point was kind of obvious to all Jews before a period of time that Jews know as the Emancipation. And I want to introduce our Christian audience to that term. If you go back before a couple hundred years ago in Europe, Jews were always viewed as separate from the rest of society. They usually lived in their own segregated areas. They weren't viewed as part of the nations where they lived. They were viewed as foreigners who were there, some foreign tribe. And with the emancipation, what happened in Europe in emancipation, just to make a very long, complicated story short, because it didn't happen the same way in every country, is that was when, post-Enlightenment, the Jews were kind of welcomed in as regular citizens in all these countries in Europe. And while that might sound like a really nice thing, oh, there's no more segregation, there's no more bigotry, it actually was in some ways catastrophic for the Jewish people, because so many Jews who remained very devout and very committed Jews by virtue of the fact that they had no other choice, they were just in their Jewish communities, suddenly the walls came down and Jews started to assimilate and they started to mix in and they started to develop these identities, thinking of themselves as German or French or whatever. So the emancipation also was viewed again by many Jews as a crisis, and in fact, what we know as the Haredim today, these what many people call ultra-Orthodox, which is a very strange term that we could deconstruct some other time, but that's the colloquialism that people use. Those Jews who, the Hasidic Jews who dress differently than everyone else with the hats and the coats and the sidelocks. What a lot of that is about is a reaction. They're still reacting to the emancipation, saying, we don't want to mix in, so we're going to have distinct dress and we're not going to mix in. We're not going to take in any of secular culture, because the emancipation is actually very, very threatening. So I say all of this, Elie, to bring us back to the dual loyalty issue. If you asked a Jew in Europe a few hundred years ago about loyalty to their nation versus loyalty to meaning loyalty to the country they're in versus loyalty to, and there wasn't even a state of Israel yet, but loyalty to themselves as Jews, they didn't even identify at all as part of the country that they were born and raised in and had lived in for generations. They didn't identify with it. They saw themselves as Jews, as separate from society. So this is really a very modern tension that people feel, and yet so many Jews feel threatened by it. My take on the whole dual loyalty issue is that if I meet a Jew who doesn't have as their primary loyalty their Jewish identity and the state of Israel over America, if they're an American Jew, or Canada, where I was raised, if they didn't put Israel and their Jewish identity first, I think there's something wrong with them, because after all, exile is a punishment. We're in exile. And if we're in exile, we're not supposed to be there permanently. We're there temporarily. And the fact that you have American Jews who take offense to being accused of dual loyalty, to me is, I hate to tell the anti-Semites this, but yeah, Jews should put Israel first, because you're not really, the whole question is, who are we? Like you said, this is just my reaction. Maybe I'm just echoing what you're saying.
Look, this is an old issue, and it's come up before I think any of us were old enough to remember. But right after the establishment of the state of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, who, was not a very religious person, but he was a Bible fanatic. He absolutely, was obsessed with the Bible and with Jewish peoplehood. And he came to America in the early 50s, and he started, really leaning into and pressuring American Jews about the need to come to Israel. Israel was tiny at that point. We had 600,000 Jews. That was it in 1948. We needed people. And immediately he got in massive trouble. The American Jewish community went crazy. Jacob Blaustein, the head of the American Jewish Committee, they went nuts, because hearing David Ben-Gurion talk openly this way, it was threatening their own status as Americans. And so, we maybe forget this, but certainly in the 50s and the 60s, American Jews were kind of lukewarm, many of them, about Israel, because they felt that the existence of Israel it really questioned their status as Americans. And so they kept their distance. Things changed for a while, but we're kind of back to that issue again, which is why so many progressive Jews are increasingly uncomfortable with Jewish nationhood. But I think we have to get to this core issue of dual loyalty, meaning in the end of the day, is Tucker Carlson right? Or is Nick Fuentes right? Are Jews in America disloyal to America? Am I going to come in this book and say something that will, endanger American Jews even more? So I think we have to really be clear about the distinction: dual loyalty versus dual identity. Dual loyalty means what nation are you loyal to? And for that question, Jewish law is actually very, very clear. It's called Dina de Malchuta Dina. The law of the land is the law. Right? Jewish law requires you to be a good citizen, a loyal citizen, and a model citizen even of your host country, wherever you might live. So American Jews are obligated to actually be loyal to America. They have to be loyal citizens, right? And the couple of exceptions over all of the last few hundred years of American Jews not being loyal to America are the exceptions that prove the rule. They have to be loyal. This whole dual loyalty thing is a canard, it's false, and it's fake. However, dual identity is a very real issue. And the best way to describe dual identity is to just remember that unbelievably awkward conversation that happened in front of the entire world when President Trump came to the Knesset to celebrate the release of the hostages. Right. And he gets up and he starts talking and thanking Miriam Adelson, right? The big Republican donor. And he says, Miriam, what do you love more? What do you love more, America or Israel? Now, only President Trump could say it like that. But the truth is, you got to really pay attention to what he's saying. He's not saying, Miriam, are you loyal to America? That wasn't even a question. Of course, Miriam is loyal to America. That wasn't the question for President Trump. The real question was, what do you love more? Where is your heart? Right? Where is your identity? And Miriam could not answer America on the spot, sitting there in the Knesset, because her heart is in Israel. She's a good Jew. The Bible commands us to, right? All the prophecies point towards Jews coming home to the land of Israel. If you say that you love America more than Israel, that your heart is in America forever, then you're not being a good Jew. There's no way around it. And so we have to distinguish between the two. A lot of American Jews don't want to hear this either. They believe that they are heart and soul Americans. But if they want to be included in redemption, and that's what we learned from the Exodus, they have to identify with the people and the nation of Israel. It's an either or.
For our Christian audience, it's not the same, but we have some similar thought process. I consider myself a Christian before I'm anything else. I'm loyal to the God of the Bible. I'm loyal to the principles of Scripture, the values of Scripture. And you would hear this in some of our songs years ago, and thought process where we would say things like, well, I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. I'm just the Christian idea. I'm just passing through, I'm part of a different kingdom. We would use language like that in a spiritual sense, not a physical nation necessarily. So it's similar, not the same. But I think for many Christians, you may wrestle through this, but in the same way that you have a Jewish command to be a good citizen, I think of Romans 13. I think of a number of different spots in the New Testament that command us to give to Caesar what is Caesar, to render to the law what's the law, to be a good citizen, to pay your taxes, do the things you need to do, but to give to God what is God's. And I think there's a thread there that's very similar. So for our Christian audience, as you're listening to this, I know we don't have a Christian nation state per se, but we certainly have this higher call to the kingdom of God, to the authority of Scripture that supersedes for me any political party, anything like that. And I often say to my church, I say the hope of the world doesn't sit at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. As much as I'm going to vote, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be a good citizen, my hope is not in the political structures or leadership. We belong to a higher kingdom, to the God of heaven. And so I think that's important. But I think what's more fascinating in this, as much as the theology that's unpacked in the book is really important, most people connect to story and to narrative far more. This is your story. You were an American Jew and you're now an Israeli Jew. So take us through your journey. What was the moment you woke up and looked at your wife and said, honey, we're going to Israel? What did that look like for you, and how should that inspire other American Jews that maybe are sitting there and maybe they're going to get a hold of your book and they're going to say, well, maybe I should do this and maybe I should identify more. What was your thought process? What were the kind of moments for you that led you to make Aliyah?
I feel like it's really unfair because I had I have parents who are not normal parents. They did not grow up with the Bible, but they did grow up. And certainly my father, first and foremost, he grew up with my grandfather, who was badly wounded in the Battle of the Bulge. Memorial Day, here we are. I'm thinking about my grandfather, who I never had a chance to meet. He died very young because of complications from the wounds that he suffered in World War II. So this is a man who's a real patriot. And yet, I'll never forget this story that I hear from my dad in 1967, when the Six-Day War was about to hit. Right? In the end, we know in retrospect, it was an unbelievable victory for Israel. We just celebrated, Jerusalem Day and the liberation of Jerusalem. But in those weeks leading up to the Six-Day War, it was absolutely terrifying. And my dad describes how his dad, they went to some Jewish Federation meeting and nobody knew what to do. And my dad, describes how his father, my grandfather, just pulled out every dollar that he had in his wallet. They were not wealthy. And they just threw everything, they had like a bucket in the middle of the floor, and the Jews didn't know what to do. Everybody was in a panic. Like, this could be the end, right? In Egypt, Syria, Jordan, they were all threatening to destroy Israel. And my grandfather just took out a check and wrote the largest check he had ever written in his life. And that's including the check that he wrote for the down payment for their house in Queens, New York. And, that was really, it just changed my father forever. And that was before he became a truly biblical, observant Jew. It was Jewish nationhood. And so, my grandfather really lived those two things. He loved America, was passionate about America, almost died for America. And yet he also knew that the Jewish future was in Israel. And that was with very little Jewish education. And so that's how I was raised, that we knew that we were coming back, that we were coming home. It was just a question of when it was going to happen. And so it took me a while to get here, but I finally made it. And I just so badly want to share the joy of the clarity that a Jew has living in the Jewish state, being part of God's chosen nation. Thank God, we love America. We truly do. But there are so few Jews on this earth, so few that are left. We've lost so many millions to Hitler, to assimilation. We need every last Jew that we can get to come to this land to help us settle the Galilee. I don't know if you know that the Galilee is mostly Arab. We're in danger of losing the heartland, the Galilee of Israel. This Judea, Samaria, these places are largely empty. We desperately need Jews to come in order to bring the redemption. And so, it doesn't, I hope that my fellow American Jews won't hate me for writing this book, but I really mean this honestly when I say it, that I wrote this book out of love, out of fear for what could be happening to them in America, but also out of the hope and excitement and optimism for what they could do, what they could accomplish if they join us here in the land of Israel.
Doug said something that relates back to this whole dual loyalty issue. I can't get away from this dual loyalty issue. It's really what we're talking about here: dual identity, dual loyalty, whatever you want to call it. When you just said before that, your identity is Christian before it's anything else. So it brought to mind for me the following: a Jew living in, one of the many countries in the world that has oppressed Jews over the centuries, knew, of course, that he was living under a hostile regime. So there was no question that, where his loyalties lied. The whole reason this comes up as an issue, the whole reason this tension exists, is precisely because the United States of America has been the most hospitable place for Jews ever. And that's why we have that issue. That's why Jews have been, as Elie said, such model citizens throughout the history of the United States, going all the way back to the Revolution. Jews have been absolute model loyal citizens throughout. But I would hope that just as you, Doug, if America ever changed so drastically that it became opposed to Christian values, of course you would be loyal to your Christian values before you'd be loyal to America. You would probably turn on America if America turned against Christianity, as you should. And by the same token, if America were to turn against Jews, I would hope that no Jew would struggle over the question where their loyalties lie. The entire question results from the fact that there's so much overlap and so much consistency between Jewish values and and American values or to go political, between U.S. interests and Israeli interests. We recently had a webinar at Israel 365 Action just last week, and Dr. David Wurmser, who's no stranger to this podcast, he's been on a few times, the great expert in the Middle East, he had such a great definition. Or a great explanation of the unique relationship between Israel and the United States. And he said, because it is in Israel's interest that the United States be strong and be America, that meaning America's flourishing and America's survival is a benefit to the state of Israel. That's a relationship that no other country has with the United States. No other country can say, we need a strong America. We want a strong America. A strong America is fundamentally in our best interest. That's true of the state of Israel, fundamentally. I mean, and therefore that's much deeper than being allies in a strategic sense. But what I want to extend that and say that also speaks to the values. The whole reason the tension exists is this whole issue. But now we live in a very strange time, and I want to throw this back to you, Elie, and see what you think of this. We live in a really weird time. Is this a terrible time to be a Jew? Is this the best time to be a Jew? Well, it depends where you live. Anti-Semitism is rising like we haven't seen in our lifetimes, that people haven't seen since World War II. Anti-Semitism is rising all over the Western world, including in the United States, tragically. And at the same time, the state of Israel is flourishing, both economically, spiritually, in terms of people's happiness and the strength of the Jewish people is like never before. That contrast, I don't think, has ever existed. We've never seen anything like it.
So the way I see it, the entire end of my book is comparing the book of Esther to what we are living through in America today. And what's fascinating about Esther is that I believe that Israel and American Jews are living two different parts of the book of Esther simultaneously. In March, I think it started February 28th when Israel and America launched the surprise attack on Iran. And it was just unbelievable, right? Taking down Khomeini and just the incredible victories that we had, right? I felt as an Israeli Jew that we are living here like chapter 9 at the very end of the book of Esther, where the Jews are defeating the Persians, right? The Persians who wish to destroy them. But at the very same time, I believe that American Jews are living the beginning of the book of Esther. You see, the book of Esther is all about Persian Jews, the vast majority of Jews who did not go back to the land of Israel when Cyrus, the first king, the first true emperor of Persia, when he said that the Jews could return to the land of Israel, almost nobody went back, very few. Right? The vast majority of Jews said, we're very happy in Persia. And the scholars essentially agree now that the story of Esther happened 50 years or so after the rebuilding of the Second Temple. So basically, millions of Jews living in Persia said, yeah, no thanks. We're not interested in the temple. We're not interested in Jerusalem. Right, meaning they were that assimilated, and Mordecai and Esther, the simple understanding of them is that they were pretty assimilated people. Their names come from the names of Babylonian gods, and so you find today American Jews are in a very, very similar situation. The vast majority of American Jews looked at Israel and said, "No thanks." Israel's been around for 78 years, and the vast majority of American Jews are very happy where they are. And so, what does God do? God sends a Haman. God sends a Haman to the Jews of Persia, not because he hates the Jews of Persia, but because he loves them. The whole purpose of Haman is to awaken the Jews of Persia and to remind them that they are Jews and not Persians. And so I think that that's what Mordecai is actually saying to Esther in that famous chapter 4, where he says, "You've got to choose, Esther. Will you make the choice to stand with your people?" I think what he's really saying to her, you've got to choose, Esther. Are you Persian or are you Jewish? And what we're living through in America today is the same thing. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, these are all the modern Hamans, right? And they are challenging American Jews and forcing American Jews to decide, are we Americans or are we Jews? Which one comes first? We are now in chapter 2, chapter 3 of the book of Esther in America.
Fascinating. And it's very interesting because I am on the outside looking in on a lot of this. And I do have a lot of American Jewish friends. I grew up with several that, they had a bar mitzvah or, but they didn't necessarily identify, to your point, first with their Jewish identity. It was just kind of something like a lot of my Catholic friends, they were raised Catholic. And so, yeah, I'm kind of Catholic, but we were all Americans. And so I think for what you're saying, that is going to be a shift. And I like the illustration there with the book of Esther. God is calling his people home. There's no doubt about it. When you look at all the signs around us, we've said this the last couple episodes, bottom line, like Israel you have to reckon with the fact that God has established a state, has brought his people home. And I believe it's in the next 5 or 10 years, there will be more Jews in Israel than there will be anywhere else. That is going to crest. And then as a Jew, you have to reconcile with the fact that is now the case, and it has it's not been the case for thousands of years, and it will now be another sign that God is pulling and drawing people home.
And I think there's an urgency here. The book of Esther is the last book of the Bible that addresses the Jews of exile. After the book of Esther, that's basically the last chance where God turns to them and is trying to get them to come home. But after that, you read about the story of Ezra and Nehemiah. Everything is Israel oriented. Malachi, right? The story of exile Jewry essentially gets dropped from the Bible after this last chance. And that's part of the countdown here. God is calling American Jews. And I think things could get uglier before they get better in America. It's very possible that the day will come sooner or later after President Trump, when being an open Zionist, when waving an Israeli flag in front of your home will become a dangerous thing to do. It's already dangerous in many neighborhoods, but the day could come very soon where there will be a real cost, in your career, in many different ways, for standing with Israel, meaning Jews have to choose, and it's only going to get harder the longer they wait.
Right. We have a few minutes left, only a few minutes, Elie, but I want to get to some of the other things that are going on at Israel 365 and of course, tell everyone where they can find the book. I'm sure they can find it in Israel 365 store, but there's probably a dedicated site for it as well. But also, you're in charge of all the educational offerings. I talked about Bible Plus before. So can you tell us some of the important initiatives that are taking place right now at Israel 365 that our audience should know about?
For sure. So first of all, you can find the book at Israel 365 store. It's right there in the front. It's the number one book right now. But in terms of your question, we are at a very exciting point because we're right here at the end of May, looking at the month of June. And the month of June is Bible month in America. And it is certainly going to be Bible month for Israel 365. One of the key issues underlying all of the challenges that we've been talking about in this episode is biblical illiteracy, right? Why is it that younger Christians are less supportive of Israel than older Christians? The answer comes down to this, right? When I talk to older Christians, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, I don't have to tell them the story. I don't have to go through the basics. I can just mention the story that we're about to talk about and immediately dive into a deeper analysis, because of course they know the story of the spies, or they know all these stories. They've read all these books. But when I talk to younger Christians, I first have to spend a fair amount of time just telling them what happens. They don't know the Hebrew Bible at all. And it's a really frightening thing, because if you don't know the Hebrew Bible, so certainly from the Jewish perspective, from the Israel perspective, that's very dangerous, because the only reason why you would support Israel and understand the significance of the American-Israeli relationship is if you read the Bible and know that Israel is on every single page of the Hebrew Bible. Without that, right, this whole relationship, it's no longer that clear. But the truth is, it's much more important than just the American-Israel relationship. I mean, what will the future of America look like when you have more than 50% of young people supporting Hamas over Israel? Meaning there's a moral confusion that is happening in America today, a lack of understanding of when warfare is moral and righteous and just and when it's not. There's all of these things that are dealt with in the Bible, and the Hebrew Bible is foundational. It's by far the biggest part of the Bible for Christians, whereas about 85%, I think, of the Bible is the Hebrew Bible and 15% is the New Testament. Without that 85%, American Christians are lost. And so you have all these people who are declaring their Christianity in the public space, putting out their, Christ is king and wearing crosses and things like that. But if they don't know the Bible, then that kind of superficial faith can be extremely dangerous. And it's a topic I know that you've spoken about in the past.
It's not just the 85-15, but the other 15 is dependent on the 85. It's quoting the other part of it. You don't have the other 15 without the other 85. I think the Gospel of Matthew quotes the Hebrew Scriptures 85 times. So you don't have the text without the previous text. You can't just read one without the other.
Exactly. And so for that reason, we are doing something really exciting for Bible Month. We're putting out 24 videos, one video in each of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible over the course of 30 days. It'll be on the Israel Bible YouTube channel. You should definitely check that out. You'll find Rabbi Pesach there. I'm there, and plenty of the other educators at Israel 365. So just to be clear, Israel 365 News is Rabbi Pesach's #1 channel. That's where all the geopolitical analysis is. But then the more biblical side of what we do at Israel 365, that's all at the Israel Bible YouTube channel. So we'll be dropping 24 videos over the course of the month. And most of these are conversations between Jews and Jews, Jews and Christians, all talking about really fascinating topics within each of these 24 books. It's obviously not a comprehensive way to study those books. The whole goal is to get people excited, to pique their interest, right? How many people have actually ever looked at the Book of Chronicles? Right? Well, actually, President Trump just spoke about it, so maybe they have now. But to get people excited about exploring these books on their own. And then in the middle of this month, on June 14th, we're planning a major online event with Jewish leaders and Christian leaders and some pretty big names that Rabbi Pesach is going to be leading, talking all about this biblical literacy issue. Why are we suffering through this? What can we do about it? It'll be a really, really important gathering. So you have more information on that to come. But we have some pretty exciting things coming up this month, and encourage everybody to stay tuned. Come to the Israel Bible YouTube channel and see it for yourself. And as Rabbi Pesach said at the beginning of the podcast, you can't do better than Bible Plus. Just hundreds and hundreds of hours of actually studying the Bible, tapping into it through Hebrew. Right, we explain it all in a language that everyone can understand, but really to be able to tap into the original language of the Bible, I think it's very, very exciting, and encourage everyone to check it out.
Excellent. This was so good. Can't wait to get my hands on a copy of your new book and to stop by and check out those 24 videos as they drop. Make sure you're subscribed over there on YouTube to the Israel 365. Give us that YouTube channel one more time, and we'll drop it in the show notes, and we'll make sure we share it with our audience.
Yeah, it's the Israel Bible YouTube channel. So check that out, the Israel Bible.
Excellent. Make sure you do that. Make sure you subscribe. Come on by and see Pesach and I on YouTube. And thank you, Rabbi Mischel, for being on with us. We so appreciate your insights, and really can't wait to get my hands on a copy of your book.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, rate, share this podcast, subscribe on Patreon, come on over, subscribe on YouTube, share it, get it out, join us on Facebook, all the places, like it. We absolutely love our Shoulder to Shoulder family. We love seeing you on YouTube. We love you listening to us on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you listen to podcasts. We love each and every one of you, and we'll see you on our next episode.